This isn't a time where we should be silent. We need journalism, we need freedom of speech. If you don't have the right to speak, all your other rights are at risk. It was considered disrespectful, to not mourn for someone who thought the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. This was Charlie Kirk's own words. It's a scary time.
The Washington Post said that your post was unacceptable, it was gross misconduct. Were they justified in claiming that you violated their social media policy by disparaging someone according to his race?
I've left those posts up. Everyone can judge for themselves.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. My guest today is at the centre of a storm about journalistic freedom and free speech. Karen Atia, an award-winning columnist at the Washington Post, was fired earlier this month after posts she made on social media following the death of right-wing commentator Charlie Kirk. In the days that followed, she took to her Substack to explain why she believes she was pushed out. It sparked a debate about how journalists should cover polarising figures, the boundaries of opinion writing, and whether newsrooms are truly safe spaces for robust debate. Karen Atia, thank you very much for joining me. I just want to look at the broader sort of context first. You were fired, then the MSNBC political analyst Matthew Dowd, who'd also described Charlie Kirk as a divisive figure, he went. Jimmy Kimmel too, of course, he's now been reinstated. I mean, are fears of a kind of slide into autocracy or McCarthyism justified, do you think?
It definitely feels like we're in this brink sort of moment, or at the very least, if I'm being generous about it, playing on the edge of having a free press or not, right? And even before this moment, I mean, we've been in a climate in America where press freedom rankings in America had actually been slipping. Where even under the first Trump administration, we were seeing rhetoric coming out of the White House about fake news. We were seeing journalists being attacked at political rallies, these sort of things. So, in some ways, what we're seeing now is a sort of a hyper focus on, on the individual firings and things like that. And obviously, we'll get to that in my case. But we have been operating in an environment where there have been threats, there have been increased lawsuits against media outlets, right? So it's been several years really of this slide when it comes to political pressure on journalistic houses. Not even speaking about economic pressures that the journalism industry has always had to deal with.
And Jimmy Kimmel returned and got record ratings, or at least the highest for a decade, I think it was. What do you read into that? Is there a kind of public outrage that's building? What do you think of that?
I mean, I think in general, there's a certain effect that happens when, your authorities tell you can't do something or shouldn't see something. And then, you're able to sort of see there's a certain probably thrill to be able to, you know, see what Jimmy Kimmel would have said about his situation. So I think there's that. But I don't want to miss the fact that the president, that Trump still railed against ABC, still threatened to sue them, was not happy that Jimmy Kimmel was back on and expressed that. So as much as, this seems like a bit of a victory, this has not changed the fundamentals of the climate that we're in.
But does it show that media owners have found some courage and are prepared to sort of face down the pressure from the Trump administration, the fact that he's been reinstated?
So many people threatened to cancel their subscriptions. I mean, they were threatened by, I don't know if it was courage or fear of losing money, right? So on the merits of it all, never should have been canceled, in the first place. But obviously, the threat that they were going to lose a lot of subscriptions again during a very challenging media environment time, at least to me, speaks that this was more about economics than it was about courage.
Well, and of course, you have not been rehired. Do you think that suggests that women and women of colour are held to a different standard?
1,000% they are. Obviously, me and Jimmy Kimmel, I was not on national television every night. I'm not a famous sort of multimillionaire like Jimmy Kimmel, right? I was a print columnist. My work was behind pens and words and the internet. So just in levels of straight up fame, like I wasn't. It's different. At the same time, yeah, I think that there's my posts compared to what Jimmy Kimmel said were very much in the line of me doing my job. And I think already there's a certain thought that, okay, Black women crossing the line and all of that. But I think it really still though speaks to and probably why people are still following my case is it's a litmus test case for journalism in America right now, and particularly for opinion journalism, at least as it's what's left of it in the mainstream media.
Right. Well, let's look at exactly why you did get fired and your Blue Sky post, quoting Charlie Kirk's remark that some prominent black women, and I quote, do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot. That's what he said. I mean, after all that has happened, how would you characterize those remarks by Charlie Kirk now?
Yeah, so even those remarks, and in actuality, he was specifically talking about Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Joy Reid, Michelle Obama. So he was specifically going after professional or very, highly well-known Black women. But he had generally had other comments in speaking about how Black women in particular, calling it moronic, and this theme of questioning whether or not he should listen to them, whether or not they deserve their spots, whether or not they were DEI. This was a common sort of characterization that he had of Black women. But in actuality, that is not the reason that the Post gave for why I was fired, even though that's what the narrative was. That's not actually true. What the Post cited as my quote unquote gross misconduct was talking about white men and political violence in America. And for me, talking specifically about the rhetoric that we have, the empty cliches, this is not who we are, that is actually what the majority of my Blue Sky comments were about. Very sort of matter of fact commentary.
Well, let me
And
come back to the post's reasons for dismissing you as they set it out. But I just wanted the fact that you got this email setting out the reasons for your job, being you're being sacked. What did you think when you got that email?
Right. I got an email without even a conversation. I mean, I guess to put everything in context, I'd been at the Post for 11 years. I actually spent the majority of my time at the Post as an editor, as building platforms for other writers to be able to speak. Probably the most notable of those writers was Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered in 2018. So I think just as on a personal sort of professional level, after having 11 years built these platforms, won all these awards, done so much for journalism and for the Washington Post to be fired like I never even really belonged there was, I can't lie, it was painful and confusing. I was
So they didn't even
confused.
attempt to call you.
There was one missed call I had, and then 2 minutes later, email with a subject line, notice of termination. And that was it.
The Washington Post said that your post was unacceptable, it was gross misconduct, you showed poor judgment and endangered the physical safety of colleagues. I mean, were they justified in claiming that you violated their social media policy by not being respectful or by disparaging someone according to his race?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's almost absurd and laughable the charges they're trying to level against me in the letter. I mean, so much so that's why I've left those posts up. Everyone can judge for themselves. For me, again, my commentary and my training as a journalist is particularly when there's a highly emotional events, particularly when there's violent events that happen, is to exercise caution and restraint. So my commentary is very much limited to talking about America generally and our gun violence problem generally. Again, remember, it was not just Charlie Kirk shooting that happened that day. There was also a shooting and killing of children in Colorado. Just a couple of weeks before that, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, had been shot up hundreds of times. A couple months before, there was the assassinations of Democratic lawmakers or shootings in so I was taking the totality of that and also reminding America, I suppose, and just noting that white men had been the perpetrators of all of these shootings. And
Those
that,
shootings, yeah, in a political context. I suppose what the Post was concerned about was your post on Blue Sky talking about refusing to tear my clothes and smear ashes on my face in performative mourning for a white man that espoused violence. I mean, in that moment where it was a very febrile atmosphere, wasn't it? There was a lot of distress on different sides of the political spectrum. You know, Jimmy Kimmel, for example, has acknowledged that his intervention was ill-timed. Do you, standing back now, in retrospect, think, well, maybe the time wasn't right to make that kind of comment?
yeah, the comment that you read wasn't even the full comment. The comment was refusing to tear my clothes. And again, it's the performative aspect of it. Smear ashes on my face and mourn someone who disparaged Black women, marginalized people. I said the full quote is refusing to do that is not the same as violence or condoning violence. I actually was responding to someone who said that I was not sort of sufficiently giving enough space to Kirk, and demanding almost that I perform a certain script or something, and accusing me of that being the same as violence. So I said refusing to perform these scripts is not the same thing as being violent.
And talking about performing your journalistic duty, are you clear in your mind that it was your duty to make those comments rather than something more measured, more impartial? I mean, if you had your time over, you would make the same post, would you?
I think overall, it's like as a journalist, right? Understanding, I mean, I think even the sort of questioning is still kind of with a presupposition or supposing that a certain side's feelings is more important than another side's feelings, right? For plenty of people, yes, Charlie Kirk was a very important figure, was a Christian leader to a lot of people. To a lot of people, including people that I know very personally, he put them on watch lists that put their lives in danger. He said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. He said that he wondered if he could trust being on a plane with a Black pilot, right? So for me to overly perform for a man and ignore, the feelings of those people that he had literally put their lives in danger and victimized, that would not have been journalistically responsible of me either. It only would have been journalistically responsible if we say that those people and what they think who had been targeted by this man do not matter. And I was just not going to do that.
And so, going back to my initial question about his remark about black women, prominent black women, not having the brain processing power to be taken seriously, how do you view those remarks now? The same way you did then? Just tell us what you think about those remarks.
Yeah, this is what this person viewed as supposedly acceptable civil debate is to insult and demean groups of people. Right? I mean, I haven't changed how I think about those remarks then or how I think about them now, except for in the case of my firing, and the post-termination letter references me sort of disparaging or disrespecting Kurt. And again, all of my posts, I said violence was wrong. I said political violence was wrong. I said that this murder was wrong. I was shocked when this happened. And you could see me saying, wow, oh my gosh.
And you were making this broader point about the normalization of gun violence in America. You've said America is sick. Do you think that part of the sickness is this appetite for political violence on both left and right. I mean, the Vice President J.D. Vance has erroneously said that it's a bigger problem on the left. But do you think there is a problem across the political spectrum here?
Yeah, to look at this objectively, it is just objectively true that political violence, if you count political violence as, you know, gun crime, actual sort of physical violence, that there's a bigger problem on the right. Those are just facts. So much so, whether or not, the administration wants us to know those facts, as evidenced by the, the instance that they have ordered the Department of Justice to scrub their own research about right-wing domestic extremist violence being predominantly right-wing. There is just it's just a fact that there's an asymmetry. As much as right now the right has been trying to find sort of leftist, amorphous motives or something in the atmosphere, or maybe, even Tyler Robinson, might have had some ideology, all of these things, the facts have been that over the decades, it has been right-wing, white supremacist terrorism that has been the number one domestic threat to the United States. And that is just a fact.
I wonder whether one of the reasons for your firing was this broader context of the Washington Post, under its owner, Jeff Bezos, shifting the opinion pages to, and I quote, advocating for free markets and personal liberties.
I will say, at least, obviously personally, the Washington Post that fired me is not the Washington Post that I joined 11 years ago. This is not the same place as the one that stood behind me and Jamal Khashoggi when we were advocating for press freedom and when we were and when we were building sections full of diverse writers across the political spectrum, across the cultural spectrum. That was the Washington Post that I knew and that I loved, and that I felt was honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be a part of. We're seeing a narrowing, a more insular sort of society in general, and you know, we're seeing more censorship, I suppose. And so now today, yeah, obviously the post that fired me without cause, without conversation, without even, a fair hearing is not the post that I joined. And that was under Bezos. I joined under Bezos. So I've never, but he and the paper have.
And do you think, is there a legitimate argument that the Washington Post had to shift because half the country voted for Trump? And, there's this criticism that both Washington Post and the New York Times were kind of elite bubbles. They needed to represent the country better. What do you say to that?
I think this idea of representation is interesting, given the fact that I was the last Black staff columnist in the opinion section, meaning in a city that is almost majority Black or has been majority Black for its entire existence. Now to have absolutely no Black opinion writers of either political persuasion, right? Is more of the acute representational emergency right now, right?
What's at stake there? I mean, it is astonishing that you were the last Black staff opinion writer.
Right. Well, it seems that they did not care about that. And in a city where there are literal National Guard troops marching around the city. There's a feeling of the city being occupied. There's an actual sort of Supreme Court ruling saying that it's okay to racially profile Black and brown people, right? And now the Washington Post has taken out its entire line of full-time Black opinion writers who have the freedom and who have the latitude, who have the leeway, even under the social media policy, to be able to advocate, to be able to say something that is happening is wrong, to be able to speak about the harms to the community. The fact that that sort of journalistic line of defense has been taken out at the Washington Post means that the communities here are even more at risk because of
Yeah.
that. And
And what does that say about America and the kind of power structures in America today?
We're definitely moving into, and I teach on race and media and history. We're moving into a time that seems to more resemble the 1920s than it does anything else. Back to a time when there was, or even, the early 1900s where, Woodrow Wilson was resegregating the workforce when there had been advancements for Black people and brown people and getting employment, getting education, then seeing the progress being wiped out, right? We're seeing the staggering numbers of particularly Black employees, but employees leaving the federal workforce. We're seeing rollbacks on affirmative action. We're seeing definitely this sort of almost explicitly kind of racist regime here. Um, and this is all while, the government is pretty much fully under Republican control. Um, it's a scary time. I mean, it's a scary time. It's a tragic time for all of those generations that worked so hard for civil rights progress. I mean, again, the idea that it was considered for me disrespectful, to not mourn over the top properly for someone who thought the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. This was Charlie Kirk's own words. The fact that he's perhaps representing a large swath of America who believe people like me should not have the right to vote and participate in public life is where we're at in 2025.
I know you're pursuing a grievance against the Post. Does that mean that you take them to court? You're suing them?
What that means is that very specifically is we've requested and requesting information from the Post specific to my firing and requesting, basically under the labor agreement, the manner in which I was fired, and that I did not actually violate the social media policy. This is what we are basically challenging them right now with my colleagues in the guilds.
Just reflecting back on what you've said about the fact that you were the last remaining Black full time opinion columnist on the paper, do you feel in America at the moment that women on the left, women of colour, are fearful?
Yeah, for sure. Because it's not just me as a Black person, but also in terms of, women also losing their jobs, also losing their positions and things like that. We're dealing with a political culture on the right that has openly said that they believe women should be submissive and should belong back basically in the kitchen, right? We're seeing attacks on women's ability to have autonomy over their reproductive choices, right? So yeah, there's definitely also a feeling of precariousness if you're a woman, and then especially if you're a woman of color, for sure.
And have you had threats to your own safety since your dismissal from the Post?
I have. I've had to up my own security. You know, and it's, for everything that the Post is saying about me endangering supposedly the security of their staff. They said that without evidence. I'm the one who's getting threats about people offering to pay assassins, basically, to come after me. So, what they did actually puts my physical safety in danger.
Is this online threats, people specifically making that threat online?
Correct. Things like that.
I mean, are you nervous talking to me now? Because, you've sort of put yourself out there, you're not going to back down, you're fighting the Post. Do you feel nervous about speaking out?
I mean, I understand that this is a different climate, but I also understand how important it is for me to still speak out. I mean, there's this Zora Neale Hurston quote, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. So there's that on a personal level. And then on a broader level, I know it's important. There are so many people who have lesser profiles than I do, or who aren't as known, perhaps, who are perhaps facing similar battles. And I think for me, courage is contagious. This isn't a time where we should be silent. We need journalism. We need freedom of speech. And it's only freedom of speech if you continue to use it, if you continue to exercise it. Don't silence yourself ahead of time, I suppose. So I guess I know how important it is for people to see me do this, to fight back and to not accept this, particularly as I didn't deserve what happened to me at the Washington Post. I spent my entire career having the backs of other writers. I spent my entire career, um, I believe deeply in how important it is to have journalism and for people to be informed, for people to speak, for people to even reflect on their own culture, their own society. I'm an American. Like I should be able to speak about what I think about my own society, right? Um, I don't understand why that should be uh, seen as a threat. I guess, yes, I know history, and it always has been a threat, but for me, this is just a fundamental, basic human right. And I believe that if you don't have the right to speak, all your other rights are at risk.
So, as well as doing interviews like this, how will you be ensuring that your voice is now heard?
Well, people can find me on social media, obviously. Yeah, and I'll be writing on Substack. My Substack is called The Golden Hour. I also teach a class on race and media since it seems that there's so much attack on speaking about race and media and international affairs. So I teach an online course called Race and Media and International Affairs, which I will start in a few weeks. Yeah, so I'll be writing on Substack on the Golden Hour, and I'm in my rogue radical professor era, I suppose, with Resistance Study Series. So I'll be writing and teaching anyway.
Karen Atia, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for the forecast this week, but thank you very much for joining us.